Okay, we're reconvening this committee of the whole meeting for May 28th, 2025. We're thankful for our representatives from New York State Association of Counties for joining us today. We have Pat Cummings, General Counsel, and Alex Regan, Legislative Coordinator. They're going to be providing us with kind of a general Albany update, but also a bit of a state budget impact report. And I'm going to just go ahead and turn it right over to Alex, and I think she's got a presentation for us.
Awesome. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Awesome. Can you hear me now? Wonderful. Thank you. My name is Alex Regan, and I'm joined, as the chairman said, by Pat Cummings, our counsel, and we're very happy to be here this morning. We want to provide you with a bit of an Albany update, and most of this will be focused on what happened in this year's state budget. We'll talk about the process of passing that budget. I'm sure everybody has seen that the budget was very late this year, but they did get it done. And then there's a lot happening federally that will impact the future of New York State finances and, of course, your county finances. So we want to provide you with an overview of what's happening. There's a lot that's unsettled right now, but we'll give you some of the insights that we have and give you sort of a prediction for what we see going forward and what you can do to try to impact this process.
Yeah, and just to add to that again, yeah, thank you for having us. I was telling a few of you, usually you travel out to see us at the conferences and things, and this is happy to come out and see you. So anytime you ever need anything from us, face-to-face as well, like we are more than happy. We're here for you. So, but if it's something you can deal with a phone call, let's do it. We're here to work with you on the state budget. It did pass on what, May 8th, right, Alex? So that is much later than normal, and the reason we just want to make sure that you know that it's usually April 1st that the state budget passes, and that impacts you on both policy reasons as well as how much fiscal support you're going to get from the state. But it was about a month and a half late. Session ends, session being when the state legislature can pass the rest of their policy bills in mid-June every year. Unlike COVID years, they cannot pass bills if they're not in Albany. They're not expected to be in Albany past the legislature past June. So why are these two things tied? The budget being so late has really shrunk down what the session can be. They're going to be passing within the next 8 to 10 session days. Is that all they've got left? They can extend it a couple days, but 8 to 10 is what we're hearing. They're probably going to pass 600 bills in the next couple weeks. Some of these haven't even been introduced. They can sit for 3 days and go. So it's going to be the budget, and I don't want to step on it too much, very vanilla in a good way. There wasn't much that can impact you negatively, but that can get that can change, and then meaning could be a lot of policy things that get put in the next few weeks. So we'll have to stay on top of it. If you hear anything, call us. We will let you know as well if we need you to weigh in with your legislature. But yeah, just because I think we're going to give relatively goodish news on the state budget, there's some clouds, right, of potential good and bad, right? So I mean, like things like you need to know also for things you're asking for. Your sales tax extenders, I imagine I think every county has them in. I imagine you have them. Those are up this year. That has to get passed by them before they get out of town. So just make sure you're reminded. I don't want to panic. I think it will. But it's not a bad idea to talk to your state representatives about things like that, especially with everything being shrunk. Things can get lost in the mix.
Yeah, to my knowledge, as of today, all but 3 of the county sales tax extenders have made it through the Senate, which is good news. I believe Allegheny should be good there, but just something to be aware of. As Pat said, there is really a flurry of bills we're going to see over the next couple of days. The agendas for committee meetings this week were truly hundreds of bills, and so there will be some surprises that in the next couple of weeks we'll unpack what was passed, what was amended. But we do expect the legislature to go a little bit late. The Senate is planning to finish maybe a day or two late this year. The Assembly takes a lot longer to pass bills. They've got 150 members. There's a lot of floor debate. And so they're planning to go at least a couple of days late. It could be even longer. And then we do expect the legislature to likely come back in response to the federal budget cuts. And we've got a slide in here on that. But there's a lot happening in Albany. It seemed for a while that there was this bit of a lull because the budget was almost 6 weeks late, but really things are starting to pick up, and our message to legislators has been do no harm. And that's what we got in the state budget. do no harm to counties, and that's what we'll continue to push going forward.
So, yeah, they'll leave on June, let's say 17th, the legislature. There's a chance they come back, but the session, just because they leave, the session lasts until December 31st. They can still introduce and pass bills up until December 31st. There is a chance that, let's say, there's some federal cuts that the state feels like they need to address. The legislature comes back in even October. That's happened historically. It rarely happens though, but it's happened a few times in the last couple decades. When they do that, I know it's going to be tempting, and we will do that with push for, they're back in town, let's get this bill through. This thing that'll help with civil service reform or something that we want to get through. You will be told no. When they come back in town, they're coming back for a singular purpose, and they rarely will do anything other than that. But you have to ask when they come back in town. So it will reopen session when and if they come back, but it's usually for this one thing they need to hammer out, and then they're gone again.
That's a great point. So we'll get into the budget without further ado. We'll start with an overview of how much the state is spending, what they're doing to raise revenue, and how they're spending that revenue. And then we'll get into some specific issue areas. We'll touch on issues like public health and the environment to give you an overview of what the state is actually spending its money on. So, to start, the state budget this year is about $260 billion, which is a $24 billion increase over last year's budget. We know that the state likely will not have all of this money to spend come the end of the fiscal year, even the middle of the fiscal year, and so that's why we're expecting the state legislature to come back at some point and make changes to the state budget based on the special provision which was included in each of the appropriation bills. It allows, if there is a dip in the state finances, and I believe $2 billion is the threshold, which will very easily hit with any changes to Medicaid or other grant funding sources. The legislature will have 10 days to propose and adopt a new state budget in response to those federal cuts. If they can't come to an agreement, the Division of Budgets plan will be adopted, so what the governor puts together. It will be very difficult for the legislature to come up with a new spending plan in 10 days, so this will likely be similar to what we saw during the COVID pandemic, where Governor Cuomo had very broad authority to make changes to the state budget and state spending as he saw appropriate in response to changes at the federal level.
I want to put a pin in this to make sure everyone understands what we're talking about here. You did an awesome job explaining, but I also think, too, we see the $200 billion, and if I was not, I'm thinking about, boy, that's a lot. I'm thinking about, this is the most important takeaway to me of what happened in the budget, what Alex just mentioned. We'll have a slide talking about it later. In a nutshell, what we're talking about is if $2 or $3 billion, I can't remember, is it $2 billion?
I think it's 2.
So if for any reason, so the state legislature, to make any kind of, they allocated this money, it has to go to X, Y, and Z. When they leave town, it has to go to X, Y, and Z, including to local governments. If the legislature has given her their powers to go back to change that direction, that flow of money, if they have a shortfall of their projected $260 by $2 billion. It can happen for any reason. It could happen because of federal cuts. It can happen because sales tax is lower than they thought. It can happen because their projection was wrong. This is relatively unprecedented. So she will have, except for during COVID, right? I mean, there was definitely, the governor had ability to change things due to emergency powers, but this is an executive branch that after all of this money has been allocated, the governor does have the power to even take money that's been allocated to local governments. There are some caveats to it, things like that are required by lawsuit to pay. I would argue like Harrell Herring money still would have to go, but that is minuscule in what it's not minuscule, it's a lot of money, but that is not, in a $260 billion budget, there's a lot of play that can happen here, and so that can happen after this June time at any point. We'll have to be aware of that. We'll have to fight to make sure local dollars are staying local when and if this does occur. So really, the lobbying, the advocacy on our end this year is going to be a full year for a budget because we can't have. There's probably going to be some changes. We can't have them impact your services on the ground with this. And again, Alex said this. There's guardrails on this. The legislature, if the governor just does something the legislature thinks is out of bounds, they can come back and they can come up with their own plan to make up for that shortfall within 10 days. But also, remember what Alex said, That's not easy. It's easier for one, the governor's office, division of budget to come up with a new policy. It's harder to get hundreds of legislators to agree. So if that clock runs out in 10 days, right, they have
Yep.
to.
They go with the DOB plan.
They go with the DOB plan.
Okay, so we've got some more slides on here about things we're worried about being cut. We have a slide on Medicaid, for example, and we're very worried about the Medicaid cap. The Division of Budget has suggested that everything is on the table right now, and that could include the Medicaid cap, which this year is saving counties about $8 billion. So there's some very scary things that could potentially come in the future. But for now, we'll focus on the state budget that we've got. This includes $7 billion to make up for a loss of federal unemployment insurance money for New York businesses. We're also projecting a loss in $6 billion in federal funding. This is before any of the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and other cuts we're hearing about now in the different reconciliation bills. This is what's already existing as of the adoption of the state budget. We lost $6 billion in federal funds. Something we're watching at the federal level is this Medicaid provider tax. Neither Pat nor I are really experts on Medicaid, so we won't pretend to be here. But what's important to know is there's a lot of federal funding that goes to Medicaid providers, and particularly distressed providers and those in rural areas are really concerned about the loss of any federal funding. We know this would be devastating to a lot of health systems across New York State, and that would impact your local health departments, social service departments, other county departments indirectly as a result. So we're watching to see what happens at the federal level. We don't have a lot of answers right now, but we know that they're rushing to try to get something done ahead of the 4th of July holiday. We'll see if they actually meet that deadline, but that is the goal right now. There's also been proposed cuts to the Essential Plan. This is an insurance plan that covers a large number of New Yorkers. Under the proposed cuts by the House of Representatives, about half of the people in New York on the Essential Plan would lose coverage. This would be hugely devastating for the state of New York. We'd lose nearly 1 million people on the Medicaid rolls, and the state would have to either step in to pay for that insurance coverage, or these folks would be on their own. So this is really very dire for the state of New York, and something the state is prioritizing in its own advocacy, and something NYSAC is focused on because of indirect impacts to counties for whatever new costs the state might have to take on.
On this too, and I don't want to even on that slide, I just want to point out to you all, and I should have said this from the jump. If you have any questions at all of this, anything, just jump in. We're not professors. This isn't a class. So just if you want, if something's, whether it be just a topic you want us to talk about or something you want a clarification on something, just jump in and yell up at us.
Yes, definitely. We'll make sure you guys have the slides after, but if there's something that's not on our slide, if you want a figure specific to Allegheny County, if there's something we didn't cover, let us know. We're very happy to follow up. So moving into some of the policy items in this year's state budget, really the top 3 priorities this year were schools, housing, and involuntary commitment. I'd also add affordability to that list, and we'll talk about affordability in some of our later slides. But one of the big debates in this year's state budget was what to do with cell phones in school. Ultimately, the governor and legislature landed on a statewide bell-to-bell cell phone ban. There's no direct impact to counties here, but it's something that we've heard from a lot of members about because you're hearing from your schools. Is there anything you want to add, Pat?
Yeah, I've got teens, so this is a big change. I mean, especially over the COVID years, I think a lot of parents, if you've got kids in school, schools were shut down a bit, kids were getting smartphones, and I know, at least my parent group, we are very used to, I just got a text just while we were up here, it was probably going to be for my daughter, right? I mean, they are communicating to parents, and parents are used to communicating to kids. Whether that's healthy or not healthy, things are going to change. This is going to be every public school, not private schools. Private schools can opt into this. And by bell to bell, it really means no smartphone usage at all or out during the school. I have heard, I mean, there's going to probably be regulations more on this, but I've heard the way this is being translated, the way it's been described, is there are ways around this a bit. So they're not trying to necessarily stop parents or anyone from the students from being able to make contact at all. They're trying to really stop the smartphone piece. They don't they don't want the TikTok, they don't want the Snapchat, they don't want the distractions and the mental interruptions to the kids. So I have heard you potentially, and you might start seeing 8th graders with this, flip phones could work, right? It's the smartphone piece that's no good. Apple phones, they can still text. That's not going to be enforced or stopped. It's stopping these from coming into the school, whether it be by pouch or just not out at all with some kind of disciplinary process if that happens. There are going to be and I'm just curious about this again. It's not really a county impact, but there are needed loopholes. There are things like students with language needs that, if they have an app for translation, they'll be able to use their smartphone for that. If anyone has a family with a child with diabetes, a lot of use apps these days to test that and to read that. That things like for good purpose medical needs still be used, but it's going to be a major change and some headaches for school boards because they have to adopt their own plan on how to do this. They're going to need to report to the state every year on how this works. It's going to be a lot of work for them. But I think, yeah. Well, you know what? I don't usually weigh in on policy. As a parent, I think this is a good thing. This is not about. It's gonna be. You're seeing some schools already adopt it, and I've heard really good results. So interesting change. Yeah.
Yeah, Bolivar School here in Allegheny County went on 4 years ago, eliminated smartphones, and Wellsville the following year.
Yeah.
As a part-time substitute teacher in the Wellsville system, it's like day and night since they've eliminated
Yeah.
smartphones. I don't understand why it has to be so complicated that from the state. It was pretty simple. They just said no more smartphones. They don't leave your locker until it's your time to go home and that type of thing.
I totally hear you, and I agree with you. I think I know nothing. I think it's. I don't have any inside information on this. I think it was the potential worry about parent pushback, even more than the kids. I think parents got used to being able to text and talk to their kids all day, and it's. I think even them showed up to school boards, but once they see it, it's been great. There are, just like everything, there's a loud minority of maybe parents that would come in and be like, no, I want my child to have that, and I want to be able to make sure that they're safe. But it's, I see a sheriff back there. I mean, you even look at these safety studies. It's better off that just let the if there is an emergency, let the professionals handle it. You don't need 100 parents trying to run in there. You need. I think that's sort of the worry, right? Is that they want to be able to be there for their kid if they need it, but the best thing for education is what your schools did 4 years ago. Again, in my opinion, with knowing nothing, but I'm telling you, this is the way. This is the way.
And
Yeah.
that was part of the debate, was should it apply to all schools? Should schools be able to make their own plan? Did it have to be bell to bell for every school? Maybe some schools just wanted it during certain class periods. So ultimately, they decided on the standardized policy, and it applies to all public schools. So that includes your traditional public schools, your district schools, your BOCES, and then charter schools as well.
I think some schools wanted to pass this, but it was hard. I think this kind of gives them cover to do. It's like, hey, now we have to, right? So even the ones that agreed with you, they were getting pressure, and they're like, boy, I wish this wasn't a local option. And I think that's what happened.
Would it benefit a similar ban in the state legislative chambers?
It's definitely something that could be debated, for sure.
Not county, though.
So we'll move on to housing. There were a ton of housing proposals in the Senate and Assembly One-House budgets. Ultimately, they included a few of the different ideas they had proposed. Notably, there is a ban on private equity purchases in the first 90 days that a home is on the market. What we've seen across New York State is a lot of big companies are buying up 1- and 2-family homes and then keeping those out of reach of families who could actually live in those homes. So this ban is intended to stop those institutional investors from buying up all of the available housing stock. There's also another round of funding for the Pro Housing Communities Program. This isn't something that counties can participate in because it's primarily incentives for different zoning changes, which is primarily not a county function. But it is money that's available to your towns, cities, and villages. And then there's funding for the City of Yes, which is a New York City housing program. Involuntary commitment, I'll turn to Pat on this one.
Sure. I think there's just an expansion of when and how one can, if there's someone that has mental health needs, potentially that we all have the county blue laws, right? When it gets cold enough, you have to be able to, there'll be a harm to themselves or others. There's more funding. There's been expansion of when a government can take someone, whether and bring them into even to get help, even if they don't want it, right? And so there's been, I think, a little further definition on when, how they can do that, more investment to services once you get that individual in there. And I think it's really just a push in general to help those in need, right? But then there's always that delicate balance of due process. You can't just take someone off the street if they don't want to be, right? But it's that finding that right balance there. And so yeah, there were some changes in that way. I think there were more investment really for you can get some better health treatment services in that field.
All right, moving on to some other policy priorities in the state budget. There is a new Class B misdemeanor that can be imposed on individuals who wear a mask when they're committing certain crimes. This was a hotly debated issue this session as well. There was a question about whether to just do a statewide mask ban or do something to crack down on people committing crimes with masks on their face. And so this is what they landed on. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think this one was confusing. I mean, you read newspaper headlines, and I read the bill a few times. Like, what does this exactly mean? Because you read it, it's like there's a ban on masks, right? I mean, we just came out of COVID where everyone had to wear a mask, and then all of a sudden you're seeing headlines saying ban on masks. I don't read it as a ban on masks. One has a First Amendment. You have a lot of rights to wear a mask. It's your choice in public. However, and always, by the way, private businesses, you can do a no shirt, no shoes, no dice. You can't come in here, so banks can have a policy. I don't want wearing, previous to COVID, I don't want people wearing masks because could potentially rob me, right, or something, right? So what does this do? In law school, I remember there was an interesting term called tools of a burglar. And so I think it's analogous to this. And tools of a burglar meant, you can have like an eyeglass to look into a safe that's legal to own. You can have a pick, right, that's legal to own. But if you're committing a crime and you have those tools, it's not just attempted breaking and entry. They can add on, and now it's this misdemeanor too. So it gives a DA another tool. So it's really an add-on for your DA if someone is already committing a crime, but then they're using a mask to try to elude their identity and prove like they're trying to get away with it while wearing a mask. They can tack on a misdemeanor. That's all it is in a nutshell.
And then another hot topic this session that I'll defer to Pat again on is changes to the state discovery laws. There was a lot of concerns about cases being thrown out because of technicalities, and so I'll defer to Pat to talk about where we landed there.
Yeah, again, the DA's pushed for this a lot. If you remember in 2020, there was a big push for discovery reform that the district attorneys were not happy with. All discovery is crime happens, one's going to trial, it's the evidence that needs to be, the relevant evidence that needs to be turned over to whether it be the public defender or the criminal defender in the matter that the police and the district attorney have, and the window of when they need to turn it over by. In 2020, few things happened. The state legislature they expanded what relevant evidence is. So so now your DA has to turn over and your police department has to turn over a lot more than they were used to turning over. And then they shrunk the window of how soon they need to turn that over by. And then a third thing, and this is what really got cleared up. There was I guess arguably some gray language on, well, what's the consequence if you don't? You miss the window, you don't turn over this relevant evidence. One could interpret the way it was written, I think some judges did, that this is automatic dismissal now. The case is over, right? And I think some judges didn't read it that way, but some did, and there were some high-profile cases where that occurred. So what they changed here was ensuring that, made it much more clear that a judge they have options here. They don't have to, if this evidence isn't turned over on time, they can just say that, well, that evidence is precluded. Or they can give the public defender or the defense counsel longer period yes, you turned it over too late, now I'm going to delay the trial for 2 weeks so they have a chance to interview somebody on this. Or it gives the judge outs instead of just dismissing the case. There's other things to this, but that's kind of the biggest thing that it did. Do you have a question? I can see you leaning in. This is good.
So,
Yeah.
which is a great thing if they're giving more power back to the judges on the discovery issue.
Yeah.
To see where it's relevant or not to begin with. But what was the timeline in 2020 what they reduced it down to?
I'm going to totally get this wrong, and in a public meeting, sorry, interrupt. Keep going with the question.
No, that was it.
Okay.
Was that 24 hours?
No. I don't think it's what, I think it was, this is like 101 of public speaking. I actually brag these days that I got smart enough to say when I don't know, and I'll get back to you. But I'm going to break it because I'm not, I think it was 10 days.
It was ridiculous anyway.
I think it was 10 or 15 days. I think it was like shrunk down to, if anybody else knows, 15 days.
15.
Now, and the part of the problem is when I said police and DA, and I think a lot of people, especially even the ones passing the bill, because this came from other states even, that's one unit oftentimes, or one central government. Here, just talking to the DAs, they don't have even what the police necessarily have right away, right? So it's like, and it's so now you're having multiple units with different even software trying to get this over, and there's not, one, you have town police, you have sheriffs, these are all under, you've got city police, yet you've got one DA, and just even organizing that in the 10 days, 15 days,
Right.
Thank you. The DA is probably right, and I am probably right, 15 days, yeah.
Prior to 2020, it was within so many days of trial,
Yes.
which was reasonable unto itself. 10 or 15 days, you might not even have an investigation completed by then, so you might not even have all your evidence. But this is a step in the right direction. All those laws that they passed back then, raise the age and bail reform and especially the discovery thing, weren't necessary, at least upstate. I don't speak to New York City because that's its own problem unto itself. But upstate, those were the legal system was always bent since probably the 60s in the direction of the defendant anyways.
Yeah, it's always that balance, right? It's like and to your point, to give a feel where the DAs are at with this, at least through their association, every DA is going to speak for themselves as elected officials. They use that exact quote, is my understanding, from what on this bill when it passed, it's a step in the right direction.
So the last two bullets on the slide we've already touched on. The state is putting $7 billion towards federal unemployment insurance, and then there are these proposed emergency powers which were adopted. The governor can propose cuts to the budget, and the legislature has 10 days to come out with a counter plan. Okay, so we'll breeze through these tax proposals from the governor. The high line here is that all four of these were included in the enacted budget. There is a child tax credit, a middle-class tax cut, there's a rate hike for the highest earners. The only change from what the governor proposed is with this inflation rebate. The governor had originally proposed $3 billion for these checks to be sent to New Yorkers to offset the cost of inflation. Ultimately, they landed on $2 billion in the enacted budget, so most New Yorkers can expect a check of about $400 from the state of New York to offset the cost of inflation. Yeah. It does not include children, yeah. We've got no comment on that proposal, but it is what was included in the state's budget. Yeah. Moving on to the other tax proposals, there is a middle income tax rate cut. Again, neither Pat and I are finance experts, so we'll just leave you with this slide and feel free to follow up with any questions. We do have some good news. So as Pat said, again, this was a pretty vanilla budget, meaning there were no serious harms done to counties, and there was no overwhelmingly new phenomenal proposal. However, there were a lot of small things in this budget that we're really happy about. And so on the whole, this is a pretty positive budget for counties. As far as total support, we've got about $8 billion that's going directly to county government. Some of the important items here are the County Partnerships Program, and we'll have another slide on this as well. But this is a program that was created last year. Officially, it's now known as the County Infrastructure Grant Program. Basically, there's a pot of $50 million that's available to every county in the state to do some sort of tourism or placemaking or economic development project. If you do a project that's focused on housing and create a certain number of housing units, you get even more money from the state. But essentially, every county is entitled to what's almost $1 million grant for some sort of economic development project. So far, in the past year, every county has applied and will be awarded funds, and next year we'll have a new pot of money for counties to apply again. So we're hoping to keep this a recurring source of funding for your counties, similar to DRI or AIM funding. I would definitely encourage you to start thinking about what you want to apply for this year, with the expectation that you're basically guaranteed a state grant for that purpose. There's also $92 million for 18B reimbursement. Is there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, that's the same as last year. This is, do you have 18Bs, or do you just use a public defender? Do you have a assigned counsel for in your public defender? So it's, as you probably know, the rate went up 2 years ago to just over $150 an hour. That doubled. That 92 covers some of it, not all of it. So it's good news. They put in 92 million. It's an approximate 92 million counties are also spending for that increase. So yes, there's money in there, but this isn't new money. This is just continued money, and whatever your costs were last year, they will approximately be the same.
There was also a $50 million increase for CHIPS, which is transportation highway money. Very happy to see that in this year's budget. There is $200 million in new money for municipal renewable energy projects. This is part of a $1 billion Sustainable Future program that we'll talk about on a future slide. And we've also got $45 million in new funding for aging services, which is a big win. In recent years, NISAC has really been focused on your county aging offices and making sure they're getting state funding increase that's commensurate with the new burden of just a larger aging population and the services that population requires. We were really pleased in this year's budget to see almost $50 million in new funding go to those services. Yeah.
So going back up to the economic development monies there, and then you mentioned public housing, that
Yep.
there was more money also for public housing. Could you clarify that? Is that what I think of as real public housing is housing for everybody, or is this like Section 8 type housing?
So the way this grant program works, again, the County Infrastructure Grant Program, is there's funding available for a host of different projects that can include tourism, placemaking, which is adjacent to tourism, economic development, essentially projects to better your community. But the state is really prioritizing housing for this program. And so if your county wants to support the creation of new housing units, and I believe there is a requirement that they be affordable, but not Section 8. These are just middle income housing units, you are eligible for an even larger grant. So we can follow up with the exact figures for how much you're eligible for if you do a non-housing project as opposed to a project that creates new housing units. But really the goal is to build more low and middle income housing, and you can get an even greater incentive from the state for doing that. These funds, I should know, aren't specifically for construction. They can't go towards any sort of private development, anything a developer would own, but it's meant to support the infrastructure to aid that project. So if you need new water infrastructure, new sewer, maybe utility lines, things like that, that would aid the construction of new housing, that's what this is intended for.
So that would include manufactured housing?
Yes.
Not trailers, but manufactured housing?
Yep.
And partnerships maybe with like Alfred State or BOCES and construction projects?
Yep, most definitely. We've heard, so Empire State Development is the agency that's administering this program, and at least for the last round, they wanted to be as flexible as possible. And they told counties to come to them with whatever idea you had for using these funds, and they would try to make it work. So especially if your focus is housing and you're looking to partner with different private or public sector agencies on this, they want to work with you to make that project happen.
Thank you.
All right. So aging, again, the highline item here is really that $45 million in new funding for aging services. This was a huge win for counties in this year's state budget, and we're hoping to see it in future budgets. This brings us a total of about $70 million in county aging funding from New York State. On agriculture, we got $61 million for local agriculture assistance in this year's state budget. Every year, we see the appropriation go up by about $1 million, so this is consistent with past years. This is money that goes to research, a bunch of Cornell programs, but it's something we know counties prioritize in our state budget, and we always fight for that increase each year. There's also $20 million for non-point source pollution control, farmland protection, and other ag programs. This is, again, consistent with last year and something we always look for in the state budget. And then there's also language in the Article 7 bills that allows all farm worker, all farm employers to provide the farm worker overtime credit. There were some technicalities where certain farm employers weren't able to provide that credit because of the way their business was structured, and that was remedied in this year's budget. So a little bit of a niche issue, but something I know a lot of our counties did care about, so that was corrected as part of this year's adopted budget. For community colleges, I know Allegheny County does not have a community college, but this has always been a priority for us, is making sure the state funding floor for community colleges is protected. We've gotten that for the last 4 or 5 years at least, so that's always a priority for NYSAC. This year, above and beyond that, we got a new program for community colleges. And even though Allegheny does not have your own community college, I think this is really a win for all counties because it's going to help bolster our state workforce. The way this will work is certain students between the ages of 25, I've got it on the slide, 25 and 55 are going to be eligible to go back to school to pursue careers in certain high-demand fields. And so that includes engineering, nursing, technology, cybersecurity, AI, advanced manufacturing, renewable energy is also in there, so really a host of different fields. And the state education department has the ability to add to this. So if there is some unmet need in your county, if there's an emerging industry, a new company that's coming to town and you need a workforce for that, there's the possibility to add professions to this. Those students are going to be able to go back to school and get trained in whatever these fields are, and the state is going to pay for 100% of that cost. So any county with a community college does not have to worry about paying for a portion of that tuition, paying for those books. This cost will be solely incurred by the state, and we're really excited to see how counties take advantage of this to both, build your own county workforce, but also your greater outside of the county workforce, whatever the appropriate word is for that, to meet your on-net workforce needs.
Yeah, this was a cool one, and you're going to see a lot of people using this. And I know, although you don't have a community college, I imagine you get charged back. Your student, meaning whether you know, I'm sure you all know this. Your students that go to community college from your county to another county, that county can charge you back for that cost of the student up to a third. The student is supposed to pay 1/3 of the cost. The state of New York for community college is supposed to pay 1/3 of the cost. And then wherever the student lives, that county, whether it be in the county with the community colleges or yours, is supposed to pay 1/3. That's how it's supposed to work. It gets tweaked. The counties always pay a little bit more than a third. So it can be costly to counties. But again, this is a great thing. This is how community colleges keep prices down for students. In this case, I don't believe for your individuals that are looking to change careers or go to school to learn a skill, the skills listed between 25 and 55, you should not be getting charged back for that, right? So this is free. The state is going to pick up that tab for that cost. I will caution. I've talked to some counties on this because it's one of those things. This is fantastic and it's no cost, and we're going to get people back in school and meet needs for employees. There will be a cost, and there's got to be some planning for counties and community colleges in that there's going to be a higher demand of people going into this, and you need the staff to teach them, right? These are special skills they're going to be going back for. These, what I'm anticipating is each community college, they might not teach all of this. They're going to start getting into, one's going to become more specialized in nursing or certain types of engineering, and that's where those professors are going to go. But it's going to be, those costs are not picked up by the state, is my understanding the way I read the law. It's the teachers, the staff, the support, the even extra classroom space, the overhead is still on the county and the community college. But the student costs, and that's what you should be getting the chargeback for, should be paid for by the state.
But on the whole, I'd say we're counting this as a win.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's going to help increase community college enrollment, and it's really going to help you with fields that you might not have the workforce for. NISAC fought really hard to add clean and renewable energy to this proposal because we've heard from so many counties that you just don't have the workforce to service an electric school bus or to deal with, electric vehicle charging stations. So as issues like that come up and you'd like to see new occupations added to this list, let us know and we'd love to advocate for that. Moving on to economic development, consistent with past years, we've got money for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and then a newer version of DRI called New York Forward. It's the same thing as DRI, but it's for smaller downtowns, and so those are dedicated funds for those more rural communities. Something different in this year's state budget is that the downtown revitalization funding can be used for communities that have been impacted by state prison closures or juvenile facility closures. This was a priority for some of our counties, of course, that have been impacted by state prison closures. We don't know exactly how this will work yet. Washington County is one of the counties who is very active in advocating for this, and we've been working closely with them and the State Division of Budget to see how this funding will actually be distributed. But just something to be aware of, we know a lot of counties are concerned about regional impacts of any prison closure, and now there's some funding for counties to deal with the consequences of that. There was also a small increase in this year's budget for tourism promotion matching grants. Historically, this had been funded at $3.45 million, and then it was cut in recent years to $2.45 million. It's something I know that your county planners really care about to promote, your local tourism industry, and so we're happy to see that small increase in this year's budget. On elections, there's money for the cost of early voting, those prepaid envelopes, and then there's a new $1 million appropriation to assist counties with election administration. Again, not a huge amount of money, but something we're very happy to see. We've been telling the state that counties need more state funding assistance for election administration, especially with all of the changes that have been enacted in recent years, and so we're happy to see that increase in this year's state budget. And then on the environment, there's actually a lot of good news here in terms of state appropriations. Most of the policy proposals that were proposed to be a part of this year's state budget related to the environment, so things outside of your appropriation bills, there are these Article 7 bills, which can be anything from banning, new gas lines or implementing new renewable energy goals. Most of that was not included in this year's state budget, but what we did keep is a lot of the good appropriations. So the budget includes $500 million for clean water infrastructure projects. Historically, this was funded at $250 million. We got it increased to $400 million, and now it is funded at $500 million. This is money for things like lead pipe replacement, sewage lines, water main breaks, and so we know this money is really important all across the state just with the age of our infrastructure, and we're really happy to see the state continue to prioritize this investment. There is a new pot of money called the Sustainable Future Program. It's $1 billion in capital projects funding for a host of different climate change adaptation and mitigation projects. When it was originally proposed by the governor, she had very broad categories for how this money would be spent, and she didn't itemize how much of the $1 billion would go to different purposes. The Senate and Assembly each tried to put some guardrails on it and add what categories they wanted funded and add how much. NISAC's priority was really making sure that some of this money goes to counties and municipalities. If the state is going to spend $1 billion on climate projects, you should be able to take advantage of it for some of your own renewable energy projects or clean transportation projects. So we're really happy to see some wins in this appropriation language. We got $40 million for municipal thermal energy network projects, $50 million for EV charging stations, and $200 million for renewable energy projects, which includes muni projects. There's also $425 million for the EPF. That historically has been funded at $400 million. The Senate and Assembly wanted to increase it to $500 this year, but we landed at $425, which is still an increase from last year. And then the last thing we'll touch on this slide is the youth deer hunting program. That's been extended for 3 years. Originally, there was a proposal to make this statewide, to add different animals, like bears, I believe were on the list of animals they wanted to add to this, add some bow hunting and other things like that. But what they landed on was just a clean 3-year extension, and we'll see what happens in future years.
Yeah, to add on that, they called it a pilot program. I think it was like 2022 was when they passed it, because it was for local option. So and it's been a really popular program. I believe it was like 54 of our counties passed it, including yours, to adopt this by local law. I would just make sure you double check that your local law doesn't also, because this was supposed to, because it was a pilot, it was supposed to expire in December 2025. So some local laws are written expiring in 2025 because that's when it was. And so by this extending, depending on how I think you're going to be, depending on how your local law is written, if you just said, we adopt this law, the fact that it's now forwarded for 3 years, I would say that you're good with that. You might need to rewrite your local law to stop at 2025. All that said, when I say anything like this, or anybody calls this, listen to your county attorney above me. Your county attorney is smarter and better than me at this advice anyway, but that's also your counsel, and she does an awesome job. So that's, turn that question to her. And if you hear if I say something that she says is different, listen to her. But I'm always happy to talk. We have a great relationship, so I can see why I might be wrong, or maybe persuade her that maybe I'm right. So, that's that.
And I think that goes for our whole NISAC office. We always recommend deferring to your county attorney on questions. All right, gaming, I want to turn this one over to you, Pat.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot going on. I mean, this is just, there's 8 here that we're talking about, but I think, forget the budget piece. There's a lot going on in the gaming world. As you probably all know, the Seneca Compact. So what is that? It's a contract that I think gets codified into law. That is being renegotiated right now. And so there's a lot to a compact. There's a lot to an agreement like that. I'm going to boil it down to way more simple terms of the Seneca Nation. Years ago, it got exclusive gaming rights in a certain area, and in return, but again, there was a lot more than that to give and take, but in return, there's a certain percentage of slot take that the state gets, and then the state takes a percentage of that, and they pass it down to local governments for operations. And it's quite a bit of money that counties like yours rely on, towns rely on, cities rely on, host cities. That compact has expired. Now it keeps getting extended while they're negotiating. That is likely, now there's a lot of eyes on this, not just in the 16 impacted, I think it's 16 impacted counties. Because there's compacts in other regions of the state, and there's commercial gaming casinos that have written tax how much they needed to put in. While the Seneca Nation Compact is up, this complicates things a bit. Other nations are watching this, and other casinos are watching this, and if they, let's say the deal is they're going to pay a little bit less in percentage on the slots this will potentially have a ripple effect in these other areas. The other places are going to ask, well, what about me now, too? So it's a delicate balance of what's going on there right now, and there's a lot again going on. But that's up in the air, and hopefully within this calendar year, that's going to get resolved. I know the governor just met with the nation recently, and I'm sure about a lot of things, but in part, I think a lot of people are hoping on all sides that this compact gets done. There's that. There is New York City has the ability this year to put, and there's a battle for these licenses, to put 3 casinos in the ground there. I do anticipate in the next year this is going to happen. Shovels will be in the ground on this. This will impact gaming throughout the state. It's even as far out as here. There are, people do travel for weekends from New York City to gaming facilities such as this, and there could be a potential negative ripple effect to some upstate gaming and travel when those are developed. Those are the big things that I see happening in this world that I just want you to be aware of. Yeah.
So we currently get some revenue from not being able to, maybe you could let us know later on how much that is there, what we're getting. Because we're one of the counties that was forbidden from having any gambling because of the Seneca Compact, as I understand it, correct?
Yeah, so my understanding of how it works is the state gets a percentage, and then they give you a percentage of that. If you were a host county, host town, you'd get more, but you get a percentage of a percentage. And so therefore, the reason I even bring this up, let's say, and I don't know, but let's say that the negotiations are done, and now the percentage of what they give to the state is going to be less. What NISAC is fighting for is even if the state takes a haircut on that, they need to remain. They can't then pass that loss on to us. They need to. We're too reliant, especially in some communities. I'm not sure about yours, but I know in like places like Niagara Falls, a huge portion of their city operations are dependent on this gaming money because of the way the state set this up. And so any disruption to that can really impact services. And that's not to say, to minimize what happened here too, but my understanding, and again, talk to Terry would know, you do get gaming money. You should get gaming from the state.
So it's going to remain, though, I mean, is it set up currently, as you were saying, if you're a host community and you get the direct benefits of having a casino or gaming in your area, you also get a bigger share of the pie from the state. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. And I think the rationale behind that is this money, at least at the beginning, especially the private casinos. I was around when those were being put in. I wasn't around when the compacts following this kind of stuff. But when I think the same theory went in and they did the host counties with the commercial.
That's when Mario was governor.
Yes, yeah. So the idea is that the host communities will have to provide more services, whether that be more policing, the roads get more damage. It's really for infrastructure, however you want to define that. That's where this gaming money is supposed to be going. So therefore, the host communities get a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on to general government, we've already talked a little bit about this, but there's the money for the County Infrastructure Grants Program, also known as the County Partnership Program. So $50 million in new funding available to every county outside of New York City. There is a ton in the budget on housing. One of these proposals we've already touched on, which is a waiting period for institutional investors. So they can't just buy 1 and 2 family homes. When they hit the market, they have to wait a designated number of days. And then there's also changes to the deductions for very large owners of 1 and 2 family properties. So if they have more than $50 million in assets or own more than 10 single-family homes, they will no longer be able to get increased deductions for those properties. And again, the goal with all of this is to make more housing stock available to New Yorkers who are middle or low income and actually intend to live in those properties. Oops. Here's that slide, apologies for that. So moving on to Medicaid, this is always something that we pay attention to in the state budget, is making sure that the state Medicaid cap stays in place. As of the adoption of this year's enacted budget, there is the state Medicaid cap still in effect, and that's saving counties about $8 billion this year. We will have to see what happens during the second half of the year, whether those state Medicaid cuts resulting from the federal cuts are somehow passed down to counties. But we'll continue to make this a priority, and we'll keep you posted on any updates here. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, this is why we all need to, that $2 billion, if the governor can open things up, the biggest fight we're going to have to keep pushing and educating the legislature on is we need, NISAC has been told by our members, and I think we all agree, we have to keep this Medicaid cap in place. It was a huge victory when this was put back and put in place. We still are paying an enormous amount in Medicaid, but luckily that has not been, it's capped on the most part, and without that, I don't know how county government would function. This is the education piece we need to do the most. We do the 9 for 90 and what those things mean. We are a government level that we have so many mandates that almost all of your resources are used up on providing these services through state mandates. If we break this cap, I don't know how counties will afford to do these other services. There'll have to be cuts, and it will definitely impact those. And we're mindful of this, and the state also understands how much that keeps growing. So they keep doing more and more costs in this world, and we are grateful that they are picking that up. But it's always got to. We're worried they'll be tempted to break that and push those costs on us, so they can make savings. I think some of you were marching up with that. I've got pictures right before it was the weekend before COVID shut everything down. We were all with our blue caps at NISAC. We had hundreds of us. The lobby day we were doing was cap the cap. We had caps that said cap on them. And it was, this was all eyes, all focus, because we thought, oh my gosh, the state might break our Medicaid cap this year. Then COVID hit, and that was all the focus, right? So, but let's make sure we're educating ourselves to even be able to educate the state on what this would do if that happens. We don't. That's the nightmare of we can't have that happen. Yeah, Terry.
Patrick, and I certainly want to express my appreciation for all you'll do on that, saving the cap, because that in itself will critically impact our budget here in Allegheny County. We have been very, very grateful that it has been capped at 10 million for us. And you know, Medicaid is large for us, that is for sure, but it's nothing like what it is for some of those other counties. So certainly my appreciation for you guys to fight that fight, because that is one of the most critical things with the changes in the federal Medicaid coming forward and what we will have to face here. Yeah, we'll be lucky if we can, you know.
Yeah, and if this,
survive.
and I don't want to push a panic button. This is not. We're not hearing this is happening. It's just that's the thing we need to avoid the most. And this is going to be. Well, I appreciate you saying thanks to NISAC. We thank you. We need your data. This will be an all hands on deck if this happens. We'll need you to give us what will happen to you if this happens, so we can make the arguments. We'll need you to come to all. You'll be driving my way now. Like we'll need to work together. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a question real quick. Our cap was already higher than the federal minimum, or no?
I don't know. Terry, do you know the answer to that?
Well, right now, the breakdown is supposed to be 50, 25, 25. So the feds pay 50, the state pays 25, and we pay 25. We're one of very few states in the United States that pay anything towards that. We have a $70 million Medicaid bill. That's what our bill is. We currently are capped at just a little over 10 million. So our 25% would increase significantly if they even just lift it to what we were supposed to be at 25%. So, you know, roughly $7 million hit.
Our state was more than the federal reimbursement overall, and then we're one of the few states where the counties have to make the state whole.
Right, most states do not pass a share down to the county.
Yeah,
But our state does.
absolutely. I'll just add to that. New York
Yeah.
is not the only state that requires counties to pay for some share of Medicaid, but we pay, I believe the stat is that we pay more New York State counties than all the other counties in the rest of the country for Medicaid. We pay 25% of the program, which is really substantial. We also have one of the largest, if not the largest, Medicaid programs in the United States. And we know just from the legislature's history, they're not likely to cut services. And so if there are federal cuts to that funding that we rely on, there'll likely be some sort of pass down. And we're just trying to make sure, as our top priority, that this cap stays in place so not all of that cost is passed along to your county. All right, moving on to public health and mental health, and we're almost done with our slides here, I promise. We've got consistent core public health funding with past years, $230 million. That's funding for things like vaccination, for rabies response. This is money that our local health departments really rely on, and we always fight to keep that maintained at 230 or potentially increased, hopefully, in future years. There is a new proposal that was adopted as part of this year's state budget to provide free breakfast and lunch to all public school students. There's $340 million in the state budget for that. There's also a new baby benefit, is what they're calling it. This is a birth allowance, so a one-time payment for new mothers who are on public assistance. Originally, the proposal was to provide this every year, I believe, for the first 5 years of the child's life, and they landed on 1 year. There's also a similar proposal being considered at the federal level to support new mothers. And then the last proposal we've got here that was included in the enacted budget is something substantial, and I'll defer to Pat as well to comment on this. But essentially, there's a new requirement that counties report on their website and then also send to OASIS, the State Office of Renewable Energy Services and Supports, renewable energy, addiction services and supports, to post on their website how you are spending your opioid settlement funds. Currently, prior to the adoption of the state budget, there was no requirement that counties publicly report this information on their website, but this is something the state has included in the enacted budget to increase transparency about how the money is being spent and what outcomes it's supporting. So definitely notable and something to think about as you plan your future opioid settlement spending. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it. I think we do need to look, I don't know off the top of my head, all these things, these policy things have effective dates. I don't know if that's an immediate or if that takes an effect, when that takes effect, but we'll look that up and get back to you. My guess is it's effective immediately. This feels like one of those now. So yeah, it's a definite new policy change that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is an annual requirement, and we'll look at when the first date is that you have to put that information on your website and then also send it to OASIS.
Can you tell me how much the birth allowance is again?
Let me see if we've got
I don't think
that.
we have it on the slide. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have it on the slide, but we can certainly follow up with that information. I believe it was a couple $100s.
Can we get the slide? to
Yeah, oh,
show
absolutely. Yep, we'll
forward?
make all of this
100%.
available. We'll also make sure you all have a copy of our budget analysis, which is a larger, more comprehensive document with more details in there. That definitely has the amount of this baby allowance, and so I'll make sure we follow up with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With the universal free school lunches, I'm a huge proponent of that. I think it's very much needed. Well, I guess one question I'd have for pushing all the money into school districts for that, does it, if a parent has 3 children, does that deduct anything from their SNAP?
I don't think so.
So
Should it?
we're fully funding SNAP,
Yeah.
and then we fully fund all the extra lunches in school, for the schools.
I don't believe so. It's my understanding that
So we're
many,
basically double paying for a lot of these children to eat.
my understanding, and we'll follow up with more details, is many of these students were already eligible for free or reduced lunch, but there was a stigma with not all children being eligible. And so to get rid of that stigma, the state is paying the additional expense of making all
Like I
students
said,
eligible.
it's an excellent program. I'm
Yep.
glad they have it. But it just seems like we're double paying in New York State for a lot of these services.
It's a good question. We'll follow up to see what the impact is, if any, on SNAP.
Thank you.
The argument, Mr. Bissett, would be that SNAP benefits, as they're set now, supplement those costs, but they don't meet the needs of people that, in that situation, that what they're getting per month is not sufficient to provide even the meals that they would provide to their family if they had to do it with no money. That would be the argument.
Right.
Are homeschoolers eligible?
I believe this is just public schools. I'll follow up with more information, but I believe it's limited to that.
Sounds right.
Can we, Alex, can you do me a favor?
Of course.
Because we don't want to cut you short and we want to take
Yeah.
full advantage of your time here. Can we recess the meeting just briefly? We're going to make a working lunch out of this. And I understand our lunch is here. We'll go in the back. We'll get our lunch. And as long as Brenda promises to just leave the camera on the slideshow and not on us eating, we'll continue live streaming. but let's just take a break now and then reconvene. Does
Most
that sound good?
definitely.
Okay.
Are you good on friendship? Is it out of
Yeah,
here?
no.
Okay.